just get convinced. Hi guys, back again for our Vodcast number 2 for our Unit 3. And I'm a little bit disappointed that your book doesn't dive deeper into the traditional theories of mass media effects. It's such a fascinating topic. But do not despair. In your third year, you will definitely come back to them. So you would probably do well remembering some of these mass media effects theories that we are going to quickly discuss and get an overview of. Why don't we start early on in the development of mass communication or mass media? Please remind yourself, mass media traditionally are the kind of media where organizational senders are sending very planned and controlled messages to large, diversified, heterogeneous, and diffused audiences who very rarely can give feedback. And of course, at the advent of mass communication, people were a little bit scared of the new technologies, and they therefore overestimated the effects that these mass communication tools might have. Lippmann was not one of these scholars because he actually said that the mass media will definitely have an effect, but it won't be a super negative effect and it won't be a super intense effect. He basically just said that the mass media will be very successful in forming public opinion. And I would like to remind you of what we had to do in our unit number 1. We talked about the public sphere and we've talked about public opinions. Overall, public opinion can be seen as just everyday conversations between people, but these conversations are, of course, very influenced by the government and by the media. Moving on our timeline, Mills actually suggested that our idea of reality is very much determined by what we see in the mass media. And not only will our opinion of the world change, but also the idea of ourselves will change. The way we maybe see our bodies, or the way we see our relationships, the way we see social constructs like democracy. All of these ideas will actually be warped and affected by the mass media. He continues to posit that the media goes as far as to give the average person their identity. These early theorists that we just talked about, Lippmann and Mills, were actually quite moderate in their views. And what they basically stipulated is that the mass media effects can definitely not be predicted. And usually what we are seeing is that the mass media are reinforcing the existing views of people and not so much changing who the people are and how they think. So right in the beginning of theories to do with mass media effects, people practiced a little bit of caution and said, yes, the mass media of course have an influence, but ultimately there are still social contexts that we are living in. For example, we have our work environment, we have our families, we have our peers. So all of these factors also play a role in how we behave and how we're seeing ourselves. Another interesting study to do with mass media effects has to do with a cultural indicator research. And it basically looks at the very contested issue of the effects of mass media on children in particular. This particular research was conducted around about the 1970s and 1980s, and that was a time when the mass media were already quite dispersed and quite ubiquitous, as in they were everywhere. And therefore, the parents in particular started to have some worries about what these mass media will do to their children. Obviously, children are still very impressionable. They are still learning about the world. So therefore, it is easier for them to be influenced by the media. And what the cultural indicator research actually found out is that the mass media are quite successful at giving kids role models. But as you can see on my slide, sometimes these role models can be somewhat questionable. And it is, of course, up to the parent to sort that out. A very important theory of mass media effects is the spiral of silence. This is a fascinating theory, and in my humble opinion, it's actually very, very relevant and very true what has been found out. Basically, the spiral of silence says that if you hold controversial views on topics and you feel that the representations of this topic are different in the mass media and in the wider public, you will start to shut up about your views, and you will not express how you feel, and you will not act in a certain way. Why are you not acting? Why are you not talking? Because you don't want to be excluded. So there's a fear of isolation that is within you, and therefore you will become mama and mama about this particular topic. Now, as I said, you not talking about your controversial views, for example, on vaccinations or on sex or on politics or on religion, has to do with the mass media not representing your views. So the mass media show us which opinions are dominant within society. They also show us which opinions are on the increase, and they show us which opinions one can utter in public without becoming isolated. I remember about 2 years ago or 3 years ago, if you uttered that you are a Trump supporter, guess what? You were ostracized, okay? And that's exactly what the spiral of silence actually talks about. So the media are setting the temperature. They are basically telling you whether you are popular in what you believe and what you are standing for, or if you're not. And if they tell you that you're not popular, you are going to rather keep quiet and not share your views. Another wonderful and very often quoted theory of mass media effects is that by Marshall McLuhan. Marshall McLuhan was a fantastic pioneer when it came to the research of the mass media, and he coined the phrase, which I'm sure you've heard before, the medium is the message. A rather frivolous example that I like to give to my students in this regard is, would you break up with somebody via text message? Some of you might say yes. For me, it is absolutely horrific to use this particular medium to convey an emotionally negative message. So the medium itself already communicates something to the recipient. The SMS or WhatsApp nature of the medium communicates to the person that you are not caring enough for them to actually meet them face to face. Okay, so the medium that you're choosing to communicate already holds a message. But this is not the theory that we want to talk about today. We want to talk about technological determinism. And it's super easy to understand because basically McLuhan says that every time a technology enters society, the structure and the fiber of society will change. Just remember how your day-to-day lives have changed since the internet or Instagram or Facebook or Twitter have come onto the scene. You have less time for your family, for example. You meet people less face-to-face and you are more on a virtual platform. So basically, if you want to understand technological determinism, you just turn around the phrase. Society is determined by technology. So we are still talking about persuasion, and Marshall McLuhan got the ball rolling in the persuasive sphere as well, because based on his utterances and based on his ideas, a lot of researchers actually wanted to find out which medium is the most persuasive. And it's become pretty evident early on that the most persuasive media are the more visual or the more multimedia-based media. So the internet is fantastic because you can integrate pictures, colors, moving picture as in video, animations, and so on and so forth. Whereas like your normal newspaper where you just see things black on white, there's no movement, there's no audio, are not as persuasive. I hope you had a good time starting to learn about the traditional theories of mass media effects. In the next one, we'll look at framing in particular. See you next time. Bye.